Thank you. Thank you. All right, first off, how's everybody doing? We need some enthusiasm here. We're going to bring back some energy. How's everybody doing? Doing all right? All right. Good, good. I like the energy. I'm an energetic guy, kinesthetic learner, so I feed off everybody here. I'm David Ryan Polgar. I'm a tech ethicist, also the founder of All Tech is Human, that brings together a broad range of technologists, thought leaders, academics, and other interested parties that tackle some of the thorniest issues in technology, like you see today in the introduction of misinformation and fake news. But let's start off. I want all of you to get involved here. So let's start off with an exercise, shall we? I want you to raise your hand if you think that technology should make the world a better place. So raise your hand if you think that technology should make the world a better place. I raised my hand as well. Flew over here from New York. I'm an optimistic American. I grew up in the 90s. I'm 39 years old. That means I'll kind of reenact this. That means that when I was in high school, imagine me in high school sitting here reading a book. I was reading in the 90s about the web and the information superhighway, as we called it at the time, and just this fantasy that it could create a world that ties us all together, and that by connecting us through this web of our shared humanity, it would break down barriers. This idea that we would connect Riga to New York to Kathmandu, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you would have access to all this information and all this shared humanity, that it was very much a kumbaya type of idea, that the world, again, would be a better place. Okay, next exercise. I want you to raise your hand if you think that technology is making us smarter and bringing the world closer together. Raise your hand if you think that technology, especially social media, is making us smarter or bringing the world closer together. Okay, we've got a few hands raised. Again, I'm an optimistic American. I want to raise my hand. I grew up on this stuff about how massive the potential of the web is to bring us closer together. But I can't raise my hand, and here's why. Here we are at TechChill talking about emerging tech, the future of technology. You're having conversations about cool things like emerging tech like VR, AR, self-driving, autonomous vehicles, Hyperloop. But at the same time, think about one of the most popular conversations that's going on right now on YouTube. Is the earth flat? I want you to let that sink in for a minute. Because on one hand, we're saying, hey, is Elon Musk going to take us to Mars? And on the other hand, it's 2019, and we are dealing with people who think that the earth is flat. Houston, we have a problem. The internet has not developed as I dreamed it would, and as you likely dreamed it would. So let's discuss where we went wrong. I do sympathize with social media companies and work with a lot of them. They are in between a rock and a hard place. They're screwed whatever decision they make right now, and here's why. I want you to remember three things today. Social media companies have been transferred a significant amount of power that was traditionally resided in governmental bodies to make decisions about content, freedom of speech. That has been transferred to industry, to social media companies. That's the first thing. The second thing is they don't even want this power. Okay, that's the second thing. If they could give away this power back to government, they would. Do you think they want to hire a bunch of people, spend billions of dollars that it's going to cost to solve this issue, deal with the PR nightmare that this has become? Absolutely not. They don't. This isn't a power grab. They don't want the power. The third thing, 2019, social media, despite their efforts, is unfortunately doing a lousy job at solving some of these issues. Okay? But again, between a rock and a hard place, so it's understandable. My argument today and my takeaway that I want you to think about is that the next couple years, and I'm on the ground floor with this, the next couple years we're going to see a transition from social media companies that have this consolidated power, and it's going to be transition into a hybrid system of industry players and governmental bodies and other community types of activists. It's a system that we can't imagine yet because it doesn't exist, but it's bound to happen, as we're going to discuss why. Here's what I talked about. Social media screwed one way or the other. Twitter, Facebook, we put a lot of pressure on them to say, do something about misogyny online, do something about hate speech, take out misinformation. What are you going to do about deep fakes? So they take it down, because if they didn't, they would be accused of not caring. But now when they act, you have another part of the population that is saying, damn you, Facebook, who do you think you are? You think you have power to decide what freedom of speech is? That's something that for hundreds of years has only resided in governmental bodies that have struggled with deciding what is free speech. So who does Facebook or Twitter, or you name it, who do they think they are to make this decision? But again, as I talked about, they don't even want to make this decision. There's public pressure right now for platforms like Facebook and Twitter to do the right thing. Here's the problem. We say, damn you, Facebook, do the right thing. But what is the right thing? Where is that balance? What should be allowed? What is hate speech? These are questions that have boggled us for hundreds of years throughout every culture in the world. Yet now we have shifted that to, frankly, an American company that now has a population of 2.2 billion people. But instead of being in a body that has public ability to vote, something like that, it's more consolidated in a corporate type of structure, okay? How many times do you hear this? Social media is a public square. Wow, Twitter's the new public square. I call BS on that, and here's why. Public squares, because they're called public squares, are done through a governmental type of structure that decides when you're allowed to protest, what is allowable speech, what goes too far, what is allowed, what's not allowed. And those decisions are accessible by the general public. And there's a whole political process to go through that. That is where the future is going. One part that I want you to remember is, consider this for a minute. We say Twitter is a public square, but we are expecting a public square inside of a publicly traded company. There's a major distinction there, because a public square, governments are making decisions that benefit society for their culture, right, for their country. Whereas in a corporate structure, you're making decisions that benefit the bottom line. Those two can coincide, but they're not always in sync. As we've seen, think about it. Here we are in Riga. How can something like Facebook with 2.2 billion people, how can they possibly scale this idea of uniformity, right? How do we know the cultural differences of Latvian culture, of Baltic culture? That's something that it's really tough when it's consolidated in specific countries. So the question is, well, should it be a universal standard? If it's a universal standard, obviously it's going to have a very heavy imprint of American ideals. Is that something that every country wants? You obviously have major distinctions and cultural differences, as we've seen with something like Germany, something like Turkey as well. Where does this come from? Again, Facebook, Twitter, these are Silicon Valley, right, based in California. Companies, that's a very libertarian space. And what that means is there's a deep embedded belief in what we call the marketplace of ideas. Came from some philosophers, and then later on through Justice Holmes, a Supreme Court decision basically said, good ideas are going to rise to the top. That we should not interfere in the marketplace of ideas, which now is the web, because the truth will rise to the top. Because on Twitter, how this would work out is somebody should say, well, this person is lying. This is fake. This is a deep fake. This is fake news. And the truth will rise to the top. How has that worked out? That clearly has not worked out, because I don't think we could imagine for bots. I don't think we could imagine for the nefarious purposes that people might try to exploit We didn't imagine how authoritarian governments might take a hold of this tremendous power of the web. Truth, again, does not rise naturally to the top. In addition, go back to the idea of cannot expect a public square inside of a publicly traded company. The government has the incentive for truth, and it has the incentive for civil discourse. Unfortunately, corporations don't always have that same incentive. As you might be familiar with, oftentimes what is engaging content online is often something that is bad for society, right? People spread fake news more than they do real news. They've done studies on this. People love something that is a conspiracy theory. So should we spread conspiracy theories that are bad for society, that are an affront to democracy? These have significant societal impacts. Yet we have transferred this power to companies that, again, don't even want this power. Something is going to change. It has to change. And we have seen over the last couple of years through the current tech backlash, it's really big right now in the United States. We've seen changing stances from Jack Dorsey of Twitter, who recently said, wow, when I originally thought of this idea with my co-founders, I didn't imagine how this could go sideways, right? A creator thinks best case scenario. How is somebody going to use this tool? Now he's realizing the ramifications as it can have real world consequences. Likewise, and this is interesting, Facebook last year, Mark Zuckerberg sitting down with Ezra Klein of Vox in a podcast discussed this idea of a Supreme Court. I really like what he's thinking there because even though some people said, well, what does he mean, a Supreme Court for Facebook? The idea is that because Facebook and other social media, because they don't have accepted authority to make these decisions, we need to transfer that authority to other parties that we can accept their decisions, right? Because again, in a court structure for every country, you create precedents. You create this jurisprudence that is saying, here's how we make decisions. Here's how we say this is acceptable and this is unacceptable, and that the average person can try to understand that. Right now, it usually works through a content moderation, which a bunch of content moderators throughout the world are sent slides to understand, well, how can I make these decisions? They're not necessarily paid well. It's quite an interesting issue that has not been entirely effective. There has been a lot of movement, though, on the Supreme Court idea, and you've even seen more in recent days. They did announce that they are moving forward with creating this Supreme Court idea. They're moving away from that term, but the idea of a board made of a diverse sector of society that is going to make these decisions, is going to look at these decisions and say, okay, can we create guidelines? Again, it should not be something that is done on the company level. One thing that I want everybody to think about here is we have set up a legal structure of you and Facebook, you and Twitter, of interacting as if it's you and another business. That's how it's legally set up. However, your emotional relationship with social media is very similar or analogous to that of a governmental body, right? As our lives have become increasingly lived online, we need to expand that same level of responsibility for social media platforms, which is going to have to be some type of hybrid system. So in other words, we got rid of the gatekeepers. Used to be government bodies, right? Courts that would say, this is allowable, this is not allowable, this is hate speech, this is something that's bad for society. We got rid of that. Great. But now, who are these gatekeepers? Right? Who is maintaining order? In addition, the larger philosophical question of the web, which is something everybody fights about online, is, well, how orderly should the web be? How much should we regulate speech? Because even if you look at the early web, there was the Cyberspace Manifesto that basically said, well, there should be no laws, right? So we have to fight as a society, as a global type of coalition to actually understand where we want the web to be. Currently, like I said, it's set up in a contractual manner. Terms of service, that's the epitome of a contractual manner. Basically saying that they don't have the same responsibility, a company like Facebook doesn't have the same level of responsibility with you because you just formed a contract every time you clicked and you said, I'm going to use this platform, and that if Facebook decides they don't want you on the platform anymore, then they can say you've offended the terms of service and you're out. Well, the general public is starting to push back at this, and the reason why they're pushing back is because social media is so damn important, right? Our lives are online, our civil behavior is online, therefore we should not treat it like a simple terms of service. That's why in the United States, there was a federal court that recently ruled that President Trump is not allowed to block somebody on Twitter, right? I mean, think about that. Not allowed to block somebody on Twitter because our relationship with Twitter through now the president using that as a major global megaphone is so important to a civil discourse and dialogue that we've expected throughout society that we should not allow the general infrastructure of social media to take place. The laws are starting to change. Something called Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act of 1996. It's actually the most consequential law that faces social media companies. I'll let that sink in for a little bit because if you know your history, you'll know 1996, that's before the founding of Google, and it's years before, almost a decade before the founding of Facebook, right, in a Harvard dorm room. So that is bound to change. The reason why there's public pressure right now to change this particular immunity, kind of a safe harbor law, is because we want more responsibility on behalf of social media companies, given how consequential social media is to democracy. That is the big part that we're realizing, is that social media is not just fun and games. It affects how we see the world. It affects what's true. It affects who I'm talking to and my friends. And it affects who I vote for. This is huge. These aspects of how we have been disrupted by social media, we need to let them sink in because it has completely disrupted our relationship with truth and our relationship with politics, and it behooves us as this global coalition to actually do something about it and say, what are we going to do to change and to make this more effective? We've seen some of these problems, how we've had misaligned interest with YouTube. One of the reasons why they have struggled, and they're the ones that now are starting to push back a little bit on what they call borderline content, which is issues like conspiracy theories and the flat earth theories that are going around. Just a spoiler alert, the earth is not flat. But the problem that they were having is that their algorithm, because they were making business decisions, not societal decisions, because they have shareholders, right, owned by Google, their algorithm was saying, well, we need to make more money, therefore we need to have more engagement. And people like flat earth videos. People like conspiracy theory videos. So they were recommending something that actually was bad for democracy, bad for the fabric of society, bad for truth. Yet the company was profiting off of it. That's a problem. And I think Google obviously knows, that owns YouTube, knows that's a problem. And they're getting pushback, and hence why certain laws are going to start changing. So now as we start wrapping up, the question I'm asked the most is, who the hell is to blame for this, right? My argument is everybody is responsible. We can't just start pointing fingers. We all need to get in the game. We're all responsible. You need to have politicians that are more informed. You need to have general users who understand and are savvier about how they interact with social media. You have social media that realizes their social responsibility. You have employees that understand what they are creating. So the last part is we are shifting responsibility. We have shifted it over from governmental bodies to big tech. We need to adjust. We need collaboration. And the final thought that I want to leave everybody, and my goal really for being here today, is I want to come back to TechChill in 5 years. And I don't want to speak. I want to sit in the audience, and I want the speaker to ask me that same question, to say, raise your hand if you think the internet or the web or social media is bringing us closer together and making us smarter and promoting the truth. I want that speaker to ask that question, and I want to raise my hand. Thank you.